Decoded, The Future of Health, hosted by Dr. Vinod Gauba and Alex Kummerman. Today's special guest is Phil Newman, Editor-in-Chief of Longevity.Technology and CEO of First Longevity, discussing the business and investment side of longevity.
It's with great pleasure that we introduce today Phil Newman, who is going to talk to us about the business of longevity. Phil is a pioneer in the longevity industry. He serves as editor-in-chief of Longevity.Technology. He is the CEO of First Longevity, which is a platform bridging innovators and investors to commercialize longevity-focused startups. Phil, what a pleasure to have you with us.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So tell us a little bit, Phil, about, you've had a very illustrious journey to where you are today. Can you tell us sort of what is it that really drove you? What's that passion that's brought you to this point?
Well, I've always been a startup person, right? So I'm a sprinter to middle distance runner, not a long distance runner. And I've spent my life really as a consultant working in disruptive tech. And it's interesting because it's not always been for startups. It's sometimes been for large corporates as well, who kind of want to innovate and move fast, which is quite interesting as a parallel to, I'm sure we'll get into big pharma and some of the attributes that they bring to the longevity industry as it stands now. But yeah, I was always looking for new opportunities. I'm a child of the .com era, which was a incredible eye-opening time for me as a business person. And that was really part of my career transition because I was a creative. I was trained as a creative. I was a graphics person, a creative director. And I realized that what I was capable of doing as an individual was communicating quite complex business models to investors and to markets at a time when these businesses were just being created like 24/7. And of course, we all know what happened with .com, but that really transitioned me from being somebody in the creative industries to being more of a management consultant. And then I kind of took that forward as the rest of my career. So yeah, I've always been looking at disruptive tech. When I used to work with clients, I used to say, if I'm on the third year of the same trade show or there's an HR department, that's probably the time for me to go. And that's really true because there was always the point where things became more rigid, much more structured, necessarily as they need to be as companies grow. And that was really the time for me to sort of move on as a sort of individual that was looking for the next gig, right? So that's what I kind of have been doing. Always in parallel, lots of things always happening at the same time. And, the sort of origin story of being in longevity was that I was kind of looking for a next industry. And I completely missed out on fintech and crypto. And was very frustrated about that when I look back and think, actually, that was the sort of prime time thing that I could have been very much in at the early stages. Could have absorbed myself in that industry. And obviously, when it was banking software when I was looking at it as an industry. And I kind of looked back and thought, well, that's a bit unfortunate. I was too deep in one particular industry at the time, or too clean tech and bionics, which is obviously a derivative of healthcare. And I just thought, well, I need to find something really new and exciting and time it right, because I was in Internet of Things when it wasn't called Internet of Things. It was called Machine to Machine. And the company I was a founder of was unbelievably disruptive. But the infrastructure wasn't there. The industry wasn't ready to absorb what we were capable of doing technically then. So sometimes you can be too early, sometimes you can be too late. So I was trying like sort of the Goldilocks scenario. Yeah. I wanted to find just the right industry at the right time. And it was kind of random. I was doing a long distance bike ride where I was on the train from the end to the beginning. It was in Trondheim to Oslo in Norway. Fantastic event, 500k, 24-hour ride. Wow. It was pretty heavy duty. And I was reading an article in the FT, and it was about a company called Juvenescence, which we all know in the space. They just raised $50 million, I think it was at the time. And that was the first time I was exposed to the word longevity. And it was wrapped into longevity, anti-aging, life extension, all of those sort of terms. And that was like, oh, this is kind of really interesting. So started doing some reading, read some books, understood a little bit more about biohacking, understood more about the space. I read Jim Mellon's book and Al Chalabi's book about Juvenescence. And that was a great starting point for me to get a sort of exposure to the space. But I also realized when I looked at it that it was still very unstructured as an industry. And that was partly my naivety because I didn't understand it, but that was partly a benefit because I was analyzing it as somebody external to the industry to try and understand what the structure was. And I mapped the industry, decided that there were some component parts in there that were really very symbiotic to the potential of extending human life and human health span. Which at the time, I was still looking at it very, very objectively. I wasn't thinking about how this might affect me as an individual. It was just literally, is this going to be a thing? Is really what I was trying to establish at the time. I realized that it was, convinced myself that it was. And my first reaction was to put an event on, right? I thought, well, I'm going to hire a big room, get all these people into one space, kick it off. Then I realized that there were already lots of events that were out there, which was kind of a rendezvous with reality because really I went, okay, actually there are a lot of people in this space. It's not just me having some brain spark. This has been here for a very long time. So, but it wasn't working as an industry as I felt, looking at it from the outside. So I decided then I would reserve a domain name. And I didn't know whether it was going to be life extension technology, health span technology, longevity technology, or whatever variation it was. So I've let all of those domain names lapse now because obviously the nomenclature is longevity as it is now. There's a big argument for health span being the nomenclature as well. So then I just got started. So I hired 2 journalists. I hired a project manager, started doing some work in stealth to just sort of see if we could write articles about what's going on in the space, get access to the people that were key people in the space, and started building it. 9 months of build in stealth mode so that when we launched, we had a backstory of content that we've been developing over that period of time, the relationships that we had. And it was September 2019 where we pushed the big green button and away we went, So that was the origin of what is now Longevity.Technology.
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful. And so you've mentioned that in your early days of venturing, you had a bionic experience. I was just wondering how this experience has shaped your view on commercializing today longevity or...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it was fascinating. Somebody rang me up and said, I've got the world's first bionic hand and I need somebody that's going to help me bring it to market. And of course, you don't unhear something like that. And it really was the world's first bionic hand. And it was for amputees. And once I started working with this company, realizing that it was obviously tech innovation, mechanical tech innovation, but also control innovation. Because how do you actually actuate the signals that you need between a third-party prosthetic device and the human body? So scientifically, technically, very interesting. But how you get it into market was what I was there for. Mm-hmm. And I realized that actually there was something that we needed to do, which was to build it properly. And this is very frustrating for some people that they just want to get to market as soon as they possibly can. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you really need to do the groundwork in the marketplace so to prepare the market for what you're going to bring to market. And that's built through successes and failures in my career. And I kind of replicated what I did in a very small world that I did in the IT world when I was consulting with Cisco. I did a whole Europe, Middle East and Africa transition of Cisco from being a hardware company into being a services company, which was completely flipping their model, right? And I was working with their team and doing all of that. And what I realized was the power of channels, the power of being able to communicate what it is that you're doing and making sure that everybody in the channel that you're working with wins out by the integration of what it is that you're trying to do. Mm-hmm. So if you understand the layers of the channel, and you're in a position then when you can actually make sure that everybody gets something out of this, then you've got a winning formula. And I knew that we had the world's first bionic hand, and I knew that the channel wanted the world's first bionic hand. So what I had to do is I had to select the right channel partners, ultimately with the right demonstratable users, right? Because I really wanted to make sure that when we pulled the trigger on the launch, that we had really all of the right media assets in place. And we did it. So I prepared the partners. We wanted a veteran soldier. We wanted a mom. We wanted somebody with a really interesting backstory. And we fitted them with the hand, and they had their experiences with that. We shot lots of B-roll. We were ready to go. And I said to all of our channel partners who are way bigger than us, I said, you can go public the day after we go public. So we just wanted a 24-hour news cycle run that we could leverage before then they would take over, because I knew that they had more marketing dollars than us and more power than us, but we were just this very small company that really had one shot, and we did it. And it was like so nervous, because we pulled the trigger. It literally took 24 hours to permeate through, and then it just went nuts, right? And that was really a great career thing for me to have experienced. I won kind of like the UK's equivalent of the Nobel Prize for Engineering with the team for what we did. And it was actually the engineering judges that, with all the great and good of the engineering industry in the UK, they just loved the forensic approach to the marketing that actually triggered the success of the company. So there's always these symbiotic relationships between having a market that understands what you're trying to do and amazing products that are fit for that market, and which of course is the longevity industry. But it's not just one product or one market. I mean, it's like 25 different categories of products to 25 different markets. So yeah, I guess that what I was looking at was saying, okay, this is a great industry. I wanted to completely de-risk what I was doing, because I spent so much time in software, hardware, services industries where there's always a risk from a third party. I thought, well, I'm going to create a whole new company for myself, using my skills, and de-risk it completely from any technical risk. So that's what I decided to do. And that's where we are today.
And I think this is what's so wonderful about this industry, right? It's the human element and that truly direct human impact that, the industry, the longevity industry can and potentially will create going further into the future. And you've sort of divided the industry into 4 domains: prevention, diagnostics, treatment, and renewal. Of these, which of these do you see as having the most immediate potential for disruption, and why?
So there's an argument that says you can be overdiagnosed, right? This whole concept about full body MRI. You will find something in a full body MRI that somebody would say there's a concern here. It might not be a red light concern, but it could be an orange light concern. And there's this phrase called like scanxiety, where you suddenly get something that you need to start attending to. And speak to people in the clinical side of the industry. Bear in mind, this is just like, we're just talking one aspect of diagnostics, which is one aspect of clinical, which is a very big vertical in the sector. But however, when you look at that from a macro perspective, when I hit 55, good old UK National Health Service sent me a test to check for colon cancer, which was great, and I passed, and everybody's happy. But it was just for colon cancer. It was just one very specific test for one very specific need, which of course the health system has said, well, actually, people with a propensity at my age, my medical history, whatever it was, they need to test me for that. But I've never had a prostate cancer test on the NHS at all, right? I've always had them done privately. So the concept of diagnostics to me is something that needs to be balanced very, very much in the industry, that you can overdiagnose, but currently most systems are underdiagnosed. And that's the argument of the fact that we've got a sick care industry, not a healthcare industry, because at the moment we're only finding that people are sick and then we're fixing those people. And that is the paradigm of history going all the way back through millennia, to the point where people are ill and they're fixed, and then we're not really focusing on maintaining people's health. Now, I know that's a very old argument in the industry, but it's one that still isn't resonating really within many of the layers of society. It's coming through, right? And we're, as an industry, over my 7-8 years in the industry, the ability to articulate this better is definitely coming through. Okay, I mean, in the UK, obviously, I would consider myself very much an internationalist, but I'm geographically based in the UK. We have this system called Our Future Health, which is the goal of the UK government for people to get a much deeper level of diagnostics at any age. You have a free blood draw, you get a full report, and then your commitment is to then continue with that process so that the government starts to build out on its biobank data. There are already 2 million people in the UK as part of that program, and the target is to get to 5 million. That's effectively the biggest health study that's going on in the world, and it's happening now. And it's all about diagnostics, and the Brits are very compliant, so we turn up, get our blood draws, do as we're told. But the point is that actually it's really giving a great level of insight at a macro level as to what's possible from actually turning a healthcare system from being sick care into healthcare because you're getting in early. And of course, there are some things you've got to be careful about not over-diagnosing. But likewise, there are things that you'll find, whether it's 5% of those people, if it's just literally 5% of 5 million people that you find that they've got a propensity for cardiovascular disease, and you're able to wind that back so they don't get it, you just got the downstream implications of what that means. The challenge, of course, is, okay, how do you legislate for that when you're in a 5-year political cycle? So then you get into the macro arguments, but it's starting to happen. But to come back to your original question, I believe that diagnostics are the unsung heroes of this industry at the moment.
And do you not find that, when we say the issue with the sort of sick care system, and we obviously have a fantastic system, it works very well when it needs to work. But when we're looking at it from a preventative and a disease prevention mindset, then the incentives aren't aligned, right? And how do you feel as an entrepreneur, as someone who's active in that domain, how do you see that incentivization process aligning better with the vision that the longevity industry has, which is to keep people out of the hospital, keep them out of clinics, keep them healthier and disease-free for longer?
Yeah. Well, we've seen it, right? So the GLP-1 agonist weight loss drug phenomena is here, right? We've seen. Okay, so a couple of elements to the backstory on this. I was at the ARDD conference in Copenhagen, and they were talking about GLP-1s on the stage, and I was really kind of agitated because I was thinking, these are longevity drugs. This is actually a longevity drug. At the time, it was for pre-diabetes and diabetes, and for, obviously, because of the weight loss at a metabolic level, it was less strain on the heart and the cardiovascular system, so it was cardioprotective as well. They hadn't yet done the neuroprotective studies, which they've now done. So it's actually, where we are now, it's actually pricking off 3 diseases of aging in one particular drug. And nobody had called it out at that point as being a longevity drug. And I kind of hedged. I remember the headline I put, I think it was, "Is the skinny jab a longevity drug?" Rather than saying the skinny jab is a longevity drug. Right? And nobody calls it the skinny jab now, right? But that dates it, right? But the point is that we called it for the first time. We then started to build that story. And what's very exciting about that is that there's 2 aspects to it. First of all, Novo Nordisk and then Eli that have come in with their products as well. They're making an absolute ton of money out of all of this, number one. So the big pharma educational argument, which they don't need education, these people have been on for years, right? But they're kind of going, well, actually there's as much money in prevention as there is in fixing diseases. You've then also got the concept of a drug asset that's got more than one shot on goal. It's a multi-disease molecule rather than just an individual disease. So cross-departmental rather than just one department. And the second thing is, of course, that people are either prepared to pay for it themselves, or governments are prepared to pay for it, and put it through the rigor of as national health systems to reimburse it. Yeah. So actually, what you've now got is you've got a drug that is kind of like a lifestyle disease. It's not a disease per se, it's preventing a disease. And I drew the same parallels with obesity as I did effectively with death, right? Because none of us want to be fat and obese, and none of us want to die. And in the case of obesity, you're now in a position where there's something you can do about it, right? Now, the US has peaked in obesity, and it's not just the weight loss drugs that have done that. It's the combination of what's happening at a pharmaceutical level, but also what's happening at a societal level, where the wellness industry is kind of peaking, right? Yeah. peak gym membership, people losing weight, that message is resonating through that, you've got to take control of your own health journey and so on. So that, you can see that actually it's not just one thing that's actually triggering this revolution. And what hasn't dropped yet is the penny that says, actually, I'm observing this as a phenomenon, as an industry, but actually it comes down to me as well. And it's very, very interesting that I still talk about this as a objectively as an industry rather than subjectively thinking about what the implications are for me myself. And as human beings, we've just been indoctrinated into this thinking that actually the concept of what we're talking about as an industry now actually is possible. And some of the things that are in the future steps of this industry are going to be incredible. And the acceleration of what's going to happen with the computing power that's out there in the world, AI, quantum, and so on, it's going to be a phenomenal industry. But it's very hard for us to calibrate it at the moment because it's kind of still early, right? Yeah. But it's so big. It's such a big conceptual industry to move around for people to understand it that it's going to take time to realize. And of course, people say, will we have our ChatGPT moment? Well, we kind of have with the GLP-1s, but it's going to be a very slow revolution because things are going to happen at a chemical level, at a clinical level, at a societal level over a period of time. And we'll look back at these points in history and say, actually, this is the point where, as I call it now, longevity industry 1.0 is the health span industry. So the health span industry is, okay, we're now going to help with diagnostics. We're going to look to preventative therapeutics. We're going to prevent diseases from happening. Therefore, people are going to have slightly longer lives because they're spending less time with the burdens on their metabolism and so on. We're going to hopefully compress morbidity because people are going to be in a position where they are having full, rich lives, and that period of time at the end of their life is going to be compressed rather than being 15 years that it can be for some people. And the health span industry, longevity 1.0, is here now. It's not mature by any means, but it's actually happening. And I think as an industry, we can pat ourselves on the back and say, right, okay, we've done that. That's a great job. Let's make sure we don't mess it up, right? And there are some risk factors to this. Okay, the clinical community is the bridge now between what we're doing as an industry from a technical and therapeutic perspective to the mass populations of the world. They are the most important bridgehead, and that as an industry is still very early. People are trying to work on standards, but there aren't standards yet. People are trying to work on training programs, but it's not in med school yet. So we've still got a period of time for that pivot point in the industry to get the concepts of longevity into the wider clinical community to really permeate. But it will happen, right? So give it another 5 years from now, it'll be in med school. The concept of biological and chronological age will become something that is much more embedded into clinical diagnostics and thinking. Somebody presents and they've got a 15% burden of years on their chronological years. They go, there's going to be something wrong with this person, right? Oh, this person's not getting off the sofa, not getting off the pizzas or whatever it might be. And you're going to have therapeutics that you can actually help that person with now, right? Because we've seen that you can actually transform people's lives with weekly injections, right? And some people need that. Some people haven't got the ability to motivate themselves to the point where they can do it themselves. So the next phase of the industry, the 2.0, is actually can we extend that lifespan up to perhaps the genetic ceiling that we have as humans, 124 years, and can we make that disease free? Can we give people not hyper extended lives, but very extended lifespans where, if people say, centenarians, I think of relatives that have just tipped into being 100. They're still amazing that they've done it, but they're not in great shape, right? So the reality is if we can get to the point where we can hit the extent of our genetic envelope on our lives, healthy, fulfilled, paying taxes, playing golf, having sex, whatever, right? Great. And that's a wonderful thing for the next phase of the industry. And partly what that will mean is the ability to reverse the trajectory of age. You won't be able to do it at a complete systemic level, you will be able to do it at an organ level, so you can kind of tune things in the body and make sure that the engine's still running properly. And obviously, part of this is cognition as well, which there are therapeutics coming through that are demonstrating effectiveness there. So yeah, that's the next phase of the industry. And I think that we've got to be very careful. I'm coming back to my I'm going to say expertise as a comms person, is that we just got to not conflate the two. We've got to have the 1.0 people doing what the 1.0 people are doing, and the 2.0 people getting funded and pushing the envelope as they're going to in the next phase. And then there's the 3.0 phase, which is something that is now, for me, very interesting, where I've kind of pushed it out in my news coverage and my thinking, which is the concept of the singularity, where we have brain-computer interfaces and we're in a position where we could conceptually live forever, either digitally or potentially corporally, right? But that's a long way off. But there is interest in that space, and that's somewhere where I feel that the next phases of the industry can start to mature. But we've done a great job now. My team, our publication, and the industry as well, right? To sort of go, okay, we've got the calibration of the stratification now slightly better in the industry. So, you're having doctors talk to doctors and researchers talk to researchers, not biohackers talking to doctors, and there's sort of the mix up that happens with people's ideas and perceptions actually conflicting with each other and dragging people behind. So that maturity is starting to happen.
And it's this sort of notion of that we're on the cusp of this sort of escape velocity in the industry.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say that I was trying to ever not cover that, but the people that were talking about LEV and immortality, I just kind of dialed that down in the way that we covered that in our publication, because I just didn't want to conflate that narrative with the very serious work that's going on in government and in big pharma in the industry that it is now at the 1.0 level. But now I feel I can sort of take the brakes off a bit and start thinking about where that's going to go now, because what's happening with this exponential growth in technology and the fact that we're seeing, brain computer interfaces and so on, which kind of takes me back to a lot of my bionic days, right? In fact, I had a fantastic experience. I saw somebody that asked me to help them. I won't say who they are, but they sort of said, well, you've been big in bionics. We'd love you to come and help us with the work that we're doing in understanding neural signaling and reading neural signals, reading and writing neural signals. And that was over 10 years ago. And I met them only 2 weeks back. And I said, look, I'd love to know, have you been to some university campuses and seen some crazy stuff, about reading memories, reading thoughts, and the answer was yes, that stuff's out there. So I thought, okay, great. That's something I'm now going to start applying my thinking to understand what's going on in these research labs, because that will feed through to this 2.0 and 3.0 level of what's happening in the space.
And in this line, and because we're trying to focus on the business aspect of longevity, what advice would you give to founders and entrepreneurs that are now active in the field? So we've understood this categorization of 1, 2, 3, but timing on the business, timing in business is key, right?
Yeah.
And so how do you approach advice on that matter?
Well, I guess I wouldn't jump in without thinking, right? I'll give you an example that we're at this conference and somebody said to me yesterday, I'm developing this new app. It's multi-omics. It's going to be like a daily co-pilot using AI, yada, yada. And I was thinking, okay, well, I've probably heard that pitch, 5 times in the last 2 weeks when I've been traveling around. The same with software that is now available for clinicians to be able to integrate complex data about longevity and EHR systems together. Again, that's a space that's getting full now. So, and I've done it myself, right? I've got this thing. I'm going to try and do as much as I can to leverage this into this market. The reality is if you're doing it with just brutal optimism and not thinking about all of the runway you're going to burn, possibly getting nowhere because you're either too late or you're not differentiated enough from the competition that's out there, or you haven't thought it through enough, then, draw breath and give yourself some time to think about it properly and kill it if you think it's not going to work. If you truly believe that this is absolutely unique and absolutely game-changing, congratulations.
Mm-hmm.
But if you've got to have that ability to be able to understand that yourself. And I think that comes with a level of maturity. I still sometimes believe my own spin, and then I kind of go, come on, Newman. Yeah, this isn't working in the way you want it to work. Come on, what is it you've got to do to actually switch it up? And I was in a cab last night. I had exactly the same experience. I was speaking to somebody deeply experienced in the pharmaceutical sector, and I was looking at the product that we're developing at the moment, which is for the pharmaceutical sector. And it was a bit of a rendezvous with reality. I was just thinking, yeah, man, it's going to take me years to get over those barriers and that sales cycle. So I've got to find a different way of doing it. Exactly what it's a 20-minute cab journey. Right. Okay. Got to think about this again. And so my advice to anybody coming in is, first of all, don't jump without thinking. Absolutely be optimistic, but don't use that optimism to blind yourself as to what the realities are, what you're going to lean into, because you're going to burn your own time, you're going to burn your own cash, you're going to burn somebody else's cash, and you might not get to where you need to be. So think about it really deeply. But there's still plenty of spaces, right? There's lots of spaces in the marketplace at the moment. But as the market grows, more people come in, it's going to be harder to differentiate. Whereas, 3-4 years ago, you'd have been possibly too early, right? So again, it's back to that timing question.
And just addressing that, the other side of the industry, we all want democratization of longevity, and I think that's a big part of the narrative. But the luxury industry has also been paying closer and closer attention to what we're doing in the longevity space, and they want in. And what are your thoughts on that? Well, how do you see the luxury industry now trying to position health as the ultimate luxury?
Yeah.
Entering this domain, and in what manner should they?
Yeah, it's really interesting because you see a lot of people coming from the aesthetics industry and kind of transitioning over to longevity, and anti-aging has always been applied to kind of anti-aging skin therapies and hair therapies and so on. So you've got that kind of crossover. The luxury industry is never going to go away, right? And obviously, we've seen like Vogue Business and all those sort of organizations now starting to switch over to the luxury concept of longevity, and that's going to be equivalent to handbags and shoes or whatever, right? It's going to become a bit of a sort of thing where people are going away, they look fantastic, they maybe have some interesting therapies applied to them or new therapies applied to them. They're going to look younger and probably feel younger. The reality is that they can actually calibrate that they are younger by saying, okay, well, I've had this epigenetic age score and I'm actually 28 where I'm 35 or whatever it may be. So I feel that is going to be something that's going to happen more and more. We have just done some very, very deep analysis of longevity clinics. And the very interesting thing is that we did a price analysis of what they were charging and what services were being offered within that package. And I'm not going to say which one it was, but it was actually a luxury destination that represented the best value for money for the therapies and the costs associated with it compared to some of the higher end clinics that are out there. So I was very surprised about that. And I thought, well, that's actually really, really interesting. So that's good. The challenge with a luxury destination, like any holiday, right, is you go home and then they're worried about the next client and the other clients coming in. They've got a rota of people that they're servicing. That's their business model. So it's the long tail of relationships with those clients that is really, really important. And it's a really hard one to maintain because, your bad habits kick in. Right? You maybe don't sleep as well as you were when you were at the luxury destination. Your diet isn't as thought through as it was when you're at the luxury destination. So the relationship with the client, which is a very valuable one to maintain because they will come back, right? Or if you can see that there's actually a few indicators that are starting to trouble you as the kind of oversight doctor that says, okay, well, actually, we noticed, how's it going? You're not sleeping very well at the moment. How have you been feeling? Maybe we should do an online session, yada, yada, right? So they're going to make more money, but you're going to feel more empowered, and your relationship with that destination is going to be, well, you're going to kind of rebook every year or every 6 months. So my answer is, not fire and forget, right? It's like, don't just try and win somebody to come in for 5 days, get them done, get them out, get the next one in. These organizations really need to understand how they're going to build that long-term relationship with people. And the generational sort of evolution of the industry isn't here yet. But if you go to one luxury resort that is running a standardized protocol that the industry has agreed, which the industry is starting to work on, and you decide you're not going to go to Puerto Rico, you're going to go to Bangkok or whatever, you want to make sure that you're having, first of all, the same protocol with the same outcomes, but likewise you want to port your data from your first interaction to the next interaction, but you're taking your medical records over borders, right? So you've got all of that rigor and complexity associated with actually registered and approved infrastructure that's government defined, that there's the industry starting to back into. So it's going to be resolved. It's probably going to be a blockchain-based system ultimately, but it's a big leap for a lot of people. You need to be able to do that. But to come back to answering your question, I feel that the luxury industry has got a great opportunity here now as an industry, but it really needs to do it right. I think it's really important, and they're great at getting people to come back and buy their handbags and their shoes or whatever it may be on a regular basis. So they need to do the same with the longevity side of things and do it right.
And it's sort of that interaction between technology, but not forgetting the human interface and that accountability element that's involved in this long-term journey of health span. It's not a short relationship to really show those impact and the outcomes. It needs to be followed for a period of time. I mean, you have a short-term gain of feeling better, but effectively it is the long-term journey, isn't it, to stay disease-free and optimizing.
It is. And as you know, some of the basics are free, right?
Yes.
Actually, you're going to make more money out of some form of radical skin therapy that's injecting senolytics into your dermal layers or whatever it may be, then you're going to say, well, okay, we actually just need to meditate more and sleep better, right? So, but again, it's you've got to do it right, because if you don't do it right, there'll be a kickback, right? That's the problem. I mean, we've seen all of these articles. I went to a longevity clinic and my biological age is this and Brian Johnson that and all the rest of it. That's a fad that we're going to go through, right? But this is a very important adjunct now to the wellness industry, and it's a crossover between luxury houses and luxury real estate and luxury travel and all of those types of things. And don't forget, we're just talking about one category of longevity clinic, because there are all the other layers below that as well, So in answer to your original question, great opportunity, and very encouraging that our analysis says that actually it represents good value for money. Who'd have thought that, right?
Yeah, indeed. No. Yeah, really, really a pleasure discovering your world in depth like that.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I mean, the time has just flown by. I'm sorry.
No.
Well, it's the passion of the industry. It's kind of, there's so much going on, and it's fascinating.
I know, and typically when we switch off the camera, we keep talking for another 20, 30 minutes because there's just so much to talk about.
There is.
And I think that is what is so exciting about this domain, that it is, as we said, on that inflection point, and the conversation is just going to keep growing.
Yeah.
So in a sense, if you're a business owner or an entrepreneur out there and you're thinking whether you want to foray into the longevity industry, this is as good time as ever.
It totally is. I'll give you just one example before I stop talking. So I spoke with somebody who I met while I've been traveling, and this person's an entrepreneur in corporate well-being and has made great money, helped a lot of people in corporate well-being. And I said, well, longevity and corporate well-being, they have got to work together. And it was something that he just hadn't actually factored in. And I thought that was really interesting, and saying, well, wow, that's another layer of retaining all those corporate clients and building out, all those amazing systems you can do on a new level, like the wellness industry, like the clinical industry, all the rest of it. So yeah, any entrepreneur entering this space, there's a great way of using this as a platform to save lives, extend health, but also to make a lot of money.
And make sustainable impact.
Absolutely, yeah.
And
don't forget, the trickle down of all of this is it's going to come down into national health systems, and everybody will benefit from it. But we mustn't forget that 2 billion people around the world don't have access to clean water as well. So we've got to be very careful about making sure that we do it the right way too.
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much, Phil. What a real pleasure to have you, and we look forward to ongoing discussions in the future.
Absolutely, great. Thanks, guys.
Thank
you
you
very much.